Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my show. I hope everyone's well. It's the most wonderful sunny weekend in Manchester. It's like May, but it's not, it's March. There's still not blossom on the trees, but we're having these really lovely afternoons. Let's see. Quick update. Yesterday we went to the northeast to see my family. It was to celebrate 2 birthdays and take out everyone for tea on Saturday afternoon in a pub near Hartlepool, and we all had something to eat and catch up, and unloaded a whole load of presents to my sister and my mum, who've both had their birthdays in the last week. So we saw my mum and stepdad and my sister and her fella and my niece, and we all sat around for a few hours and had a nice time. Jeremy and I drove through, and I'd looked up online to see if there was any kind of record shops in Hartlepool or bookshops, because we'd have a kind of an hour and a half or something when we first got there if we set off early enough, and if the traffic was good, and the traffic was great. So we had a lovely drive there through the sun and found Northern Rock Records, where they had all kinds of things, and Jeremy bought a whole pile of vinyl LPs, mostly disco, of course. And they had this amazing junk shop that opened out into a courtyard that had things like a painted bus filled with succulent plants and sheds and stone angels and a large cage of finches and all kinds of stuff on display. It was like a kind of magical land, really. So that was our first stop, and then we found Needful Things bookshop in the middle of Hartlepool. The weird thing about that was I'd been watching, before setting off, I watched a video from Jules Burt, whose channel I often watch on YouTube, his book collectory stuff. And he was talking about, at one point, because he was exploring a bookshop down south somewhere, and he held up the covers of this collection called New Writings in SF that Corgi published from the mid-60s to the late 70s. And all the covers were amazing, and they looked like the most amazing science fiction anthologies. I'd never seen them. I was kind of vaguely aware of them. I think we probably had them in the town library. I might have read them. Anyway, I'd got all excited about that before we left, and messaged my friend Stuart in Edinburgh. Like, did he know about these? We should collect all of them, and got all excited. And then when we got to, here's Socky. When we got to Needful Things at about, 3:30 in the afternoon, it was this lovely, perfect bookshop. In the kind of bookshop that lots of towns had. Darlington used to have bookshops like this. Second-hand, vintage, lots of science fiction, lots of horror, lots of pulp novels, with an upstairs bargain basement. And the woman in there, I didn't get her name, sat there with all this kind of silver witchy hair, though she was quite young, telling me about how the attic had to be called the bargain basement, because that just seemed right. So it was nostalgic, because yes, there were shops like that before. Darlington had them. There was one in Durham. It was very nostalgic to find this. And she said, is there anything in particular you're looking for? And usually I'm just, I'm browsing, I'm looking at everything. But I did happen to say, well, there is this series published by Corgi between the mid-60s and late 70s called New Writings in SF, and I've just been put onto them. And she went in the usual kind of fobbing off way of booksellers. Oh, well, I thought, if I have it, it'll be over there, any of them. And I looked, and right by where I was standing was the science fiction section. It was quite small. Every bit of this was quite dinky, really. There was a pile of 5 anthologies, and amongst them, Volume 1 of the Corgi series that I was talking about. This is a reprint from the 70s. I just love these psychedelic covers. This is the 1964 collection. for £2. And most of her prices were kind of eBay prices, really, except this isn't. These books tend to be a bit more online. And I shouldn't be saying this because I'm going to be shopping for the rest of them, and I don't want to send other people off looking for them and bumping up the prices. Anyway, it looks like a smashing collection. There's an Aldous short story in here. And I also got The Future Makers, edited by Peter Haining. Now, I have an idea that anthologies edited by Peter Haining tend to be snapped up by people and go for all kinds of prices. Haining was a kind of hero in the anthologizing world. He's known to Doctor Who fans for his annual hardback non-fiction books, beginning with Doctor Who: A Celebration in 1983, the book that my big nana told me was going to break the bank if I asked for it from her for my birthday when I was 14. And this looks great as well. An amazing roster of writers. So that was £2 as well. So my shopping yesterday, these amazing things, was £4. And quite modest, really. Jeremy gets his records. I think he spent £20 on vinyl. And I'm happy to get a couple of £2 ancient paperbacks that, to me, are absolute treasure. But to most people, including collectors, wouldn't mean an awful lot. These are well-read, heavily read reading copies. And that's okay with me. I like that. I feel like I've rescued things from the brink, as I keep saying, the brink of non-existence. The day before, we'd been for an afternoon in Cheadle. It was my reward for a week of lots of writing. We went and had a milkshake in I think it's called the Bretso Lounge in Cheadle. Not before scouring the second-hand shops, of course, and in a bargain bin in the the brain injury charity shop, which is quite a vivid name for a shop, really. I found something I'd been looking for, something I'd almost bought on eBay for quite a lot of money. It's these 1990s or early 2000s hardbacks of the Narnia books. Ted Smart produced these, which is a kind of packaging company, I think, rather than a publisher. They do cheaper editions of pre-existing books, I think, or bind-ups as they're called. These, though, are smashing. They came in a box set, I believe. It was like a gift set. This is missing one of the collection. But they were 20p each, which is... battery's going. 20p each is ridiculous. I love them because of the 90s artwork. I love the 60s Pauline Baynes covers that we had at school. I love the 1980s photorealistic covers by an artist whose name I forget. But these 90s ones are special too, I think. And these are nice copies, I think. You know, it's not a fancy publisher, but they did a nice job on these, I think. And again, they're reading copies. They're a bit battered. They've actually been read by somebody who clearly chucked them about and coloured them in. Look at that. Somebody's had their felt tips out. But these are nicely spread out for reading, for easy reading, by somebody of my advanced age. I have, of course, a complete set of the 60s and the 80s, and I think the paperbacks of these, all with the Pauline Baynes drawings, but they're a bit cramped, especially the 80s one, which is in a box set, and the glue seems to mean that you can only open the book this much to read it, which is really annoying. First world problems, as they say, but these are very luxurious for reading. They feel like copies that should be in a school, the kind of first copy that you read of these. So they're very pleasing anyway, and I was amazed to get them for so little. Clearly they'd knocked around in the shop for a long time if they'd knocked them down to 20p each. So again, I felt like I was rescuing these books. And I've just finished reading Stuart, A Life Backwards, which I've talked about before on here. This is our book club book for our local group. I think middle of this month. This is woundingly upsetting by the end. At the beginning, I wasn't so sure. We got a lot of detail about life in care, about prison, about drugs, about glue sniffing, all of which we have to learn about, all of which we have to know. And I was trying to orient myself in the book until about halfway through, when it kind of kicks in, and we do know these two fellas, the kind of middle-class writer and the chaotic Stuart. We know them very well, and they're a kind of double act in the book. And it makes the ending of this really upsetting. Lots to say about this. I'm saving it for book club. I think my thoughts. And there's interesting things that leap out of it straight away. The idea that, quotes, chaotic people who end up in the hands of the law, and people who end up on the streets, are more often on the public record than your average tax-paying individual. They come to more notice, they go down in history. It's mentioned how many times Stuart has been on TV, interviewed for local news programmes. And later on, when the author, Alexander Masters, goes to meet the very old grandparents of Stuart, and they talk about knowing nothing about their forebears because they are the first generation who are literate. And so there's no record at all of so many members of of past generations, if at all. So this sense of people arriving out of history from nothing, like literally nothing, becomes very palpable. And it makes you realise how different that is for people depending upon which class they grow up in. Which is why I will always talk about those very real and palpable differences between the different classes in the UK, because of the expectations put on people, the lack of expectations, the lack of opportunities afforded to people who aren't well off or don't come from a well-off background. Yeah, lots to say about this. It's very rooted in the place as well, the kind of Cambridgeshire, Norfolk world in the background of this. Yeah, if Stuart is a freak, he says, I salute freaks. Because he talks about what this boy has come through to get to the age of 33 and be as socially adept or adroit, he calls him, his social adroitness, which manifests itself in the fact that the narrator isn't scared of him, of his chaos and violence, which are all documented, but Stuart is so sensitive and careful. He makes it so that this person writing about him feels at ease with him and never threatened. And he pays tribute to that, to what an effort that must have taken for somebody to have come through this stuff, to then expend the effort on making other people feel comfortable when he's been treated so badly, and the treatment is horrendous. And it goes right back to kind of a childhood of being abused by family and babysitters, and you realise some people just don't stand a chance. That violence is bound up in them, and he ends up on drugs and glue, and it seems like nothing could have changed that, and he almost says as much as that towards the end of his life, the end of the book. Anyway, it's a very affecting book, I think. I'd love to see the TV version now, which I don't think you can really get anywhere nowadays. It's not on iPlayer. I wish they'd bring it back. And I'm pleased I got this nice hardback copy as well, because I think it'll be a book I will return to. And by the end, the illustrations, which I was trying to describe the other day and describing them as kind of Inspector Clouseau cartoons, they're not. I can see Sempe, Hervé Sempe, the French cartoonist, in them. So that's nice as well to have this kind of strange smattering of cartoons throughout this. Yeah, I'd recommend it. Okay, I think that's all of my reading and buying updates, my book haul updates. I'm going to go on and read some science fiction this afternoon in the sun. Science fiction in the sun with my cat. With some more of this, the Mushroom Planet, back to this, and dipping into this and seeing if it's as good as all that. I have a feeling it's going to be. And I have a feeling I might be looking for other volumes in the series. Okay. Tomorrow's back to work. And I think the weather's going to change as well. Socks says goodbye. Don't you, Socks? Oh, I'm lifting him up so he'll be cross. Say goodbye, Socks. Goodbye, everyone. And I'll see you again quite soon.